any cases. In other circumstances, they knew about the services, but they didn't know how to access them. A subset of that was people who sort of knew services were out there, but they were afraid to try to access those services. This issue was especially acute among immigrants and the undocumented. Another group of people we identified in the survey were those who actually did find the services. They knew they were there, they tried to get them, and they ended up in sort of an unending loop or jungle, which you can see on the diagram as the service jungle, where they either didn't get the services they needed, or they got some of those services, but there was no comprehensive, thought through follow-up to make sure that having made it through the service jungle, they were actually receiving everything that they and their families needed. Now, for some time, many of you also know United Way has been focusing its resources on disadvantaged children from birth to age 5 and their families. Now, the benefits, the proven benefits of that approach will be discussed by our other two speakers in a few moments. Right now, I'll just say that the Middlesex County Alliance was conceived as a method of helping that particular group of people, birth to age 5, and their families in a way that really was not fully available to them. And we call the initiative Little Hands, Big Futures. Structurally, it's anchored by the resource line that you see on the screen. The line is staffed by care managers who will refer cases to our community partners for care. The community partners will then report back to our care manager, thus ensuring that the families get the full range of service that they need, and hopefully also empowering the families to seek additional services should they need them in the future, and advocating for themselves and their children as their children grow, which I think is a really important part of this, that the families themselves are empowered to move forward in the future. I should also add that the United Way board has made a substantial financial investment in this initiative. And also we are seeking ARP and other funds to make sure that it's a vibrant, working, and well-received initiative in Middlesex County. Now, the initiative will not work without the help of our many community partners many of whom, or actually all of whom, have worked with us in the past, who have areas of expertise that we know we can draw upon and make referrals to, to help these families. But I think that Tom will discuss the fact that collaboration is the key to the success of this effort. Tom?
Thanks, Neil. Can you hear me okay? Good.
I can.
Good, because I've had some, half the time when I get on Zoom, I sound like a chipmunk, so I'm happy that I'm myself today. Good morning, everybody, and I'm really delighted to be here. And to me, this is an incredibly important initiative. This is actually the first local family success initiative in the state that's focused on very young children and their families and their communities. So from the outset, this is a groundbreaking effort, and I don't think it possibly could be more important, not only for today, but for our future. I want to reflect before I go into the alliance itself. I want to reflect just a couple of minutes on my career. I started as a welfare caseworker. Then I went from there came to New Jersey to a very prestigious public policy school, and then went on to be the deputy director of alcoholism services in New York City, and then to leadership positions in mental health. I was the child welfare director. I was the head of juvenile justice. Throughout that entire journey, nobody ever talked about what were the lives like of the people who ended up needing crisis intervention. It was always a point in time, and people had fallen into distress of one sort or another because they didn't have what they need to succeed. But all along the way, from like my frontline casework experience to the loftiest people at Princeton, to all these, high-level positions, everything was organized around how do we try to pick up the pieces of shattered lives when they haven't had what they need in the first place. And when Fahim Williams, the 8-year-old boy, died tragically in Newark, a bunch of us who have been trying to fix existing systems came to the realization that fixing existing systems is really not going to secure our future in any way. Fahim Williams tragically had been found under a staircase in a plastic garbage bag in Newark, and his short life had involved, I think, 15 or 16 different agencies who have been trying to work with them, and they all failed him. They just completely failed him, and unfortunately, he's not the only one. So the idea of flipping the script and looking at not how do we respond to crises and what happens to people when they don't have what they need, we started thinking about the concept of family success. What are the conditions where families can be successful in raising their kids? And we started that in Newark. It's grown into a statewide movement, of which Gloria is not only a local leader, but a leader in the Family Success Institute, as is Miss Lamy, who I'm glad to see. Hi, Cindy. This is and it's always so interesting to me, and Cindy and I argue about this, but there's a lot of research about the importance of early childhood success, but I have never talked to a parent of any income level or background who doesn't know the obvious, that there are a basic set of things that any family needs to have in place in order to raise their children well. So the first thing in our family success thinking is life is a journey. It's not a point in time. It's not a crisis. It's a journey, and every step along the way builds a foundation for whatever's going to happen next. It's pretty simple. And obviously, all the research shows that probably the most important aspect of that journey is right at the start, in terms of how well kids are doing in their families and how well their families are doing in their own lives. So we developed this idea of looking at how do we support families and work with families around their journeys to successfully raise their kids. We looked at what are the basic elements that families need to have a chance to raise their kids. So obviously very good relationships within the family, but also very strong relationships and connections with their community. Social isolation is one of the biggest risk factors for anybody to get into trouble. So it's family relationships and community connections. Safety defined broadly, whether it's physical, psychological, environmental, virtual, but if people don't feel safe and in fact are safe, they're going to have really, really difficult time. And then financial security. If people don't have the ability to put a roof over their head, food on the table, to get transportation, have the amenities of life, it's incredibly stressful. Thirdly is lifelong learning, starting right from the beginning of life all the way through life, and education. And finally is good health and well-being. And this mixture of factors, if they're not in place in some form or fashion, families are going to really, struggle and in a lot of ways fall apart. The second aspect of this is that particularly for families at risk, they feel with totally good reason that they don't have any say about what they get. And one of the most alienating factors for anybody is when you feel like you don't have any control over your life. So there are all these services and resources theories and everything out there to help people, but the people who are supposed to be helped don't have a say in what they're getting and how they're getting it and where they're getting it and when they're getting it. So the second principle in family success is parent leadership and community voice, to bring the people who are trying to serve into the mainstream of decision making about their own lives. And then the third component of this is where are we spending our money? Follow the money. I mean, in every other field, we say, how are we spending our money? Well, a couple of years ago, Cindy Lamy, who you'll hear from in a while, and our Family Success Institute looked at the New Jersey state budget using the Family Success Framework. And we asked how much in the state budget, looking at state and federal funds, are we spending on helping people succeed as opposed to intervening as they begin to get into trouble, but more importantly, when they're experiencing full distress. And I suppose not surprisingly, but tragically, we're spending 90% of our dollars, billions of dollars, on either intervention or very, very deep end, picking up the pieces of shattered lives. And we're only spending 10% of our resources on investing in those factors that are going to help families succeed in raising their kids, and particularly young kids in this project. So this project that United Way of Central Jersey is undertaking, it's important not only for the kids and the families of Middlesex County, but it's a stalking horse for a real shift in the way that we think about and provide services for kids and countries and families, not only in New Jersey, but I think it's a little unique across the country that we're trying to make this kind of shift. So one of the factors in the needs assessment we found is there are a lot of things out there for families, but they're very not only difficult to find, but they're difficult to navigate. You go to one place and then, well, we don't quite handle that, so you have to go to another place, and then you go to another place, and by the time you're through, your journey is you're so frustrated that you almost throw up your hands. So one of the ideas behind the Alliance is to get all the different players together, and they're all doing amazing work on their own, together into what we're calling an organized system of services and supports to promote early childhood success. And I'm not going to run through all these components of what organized systems are, but they basically run from, how do people find out what's out there in a way that they can understand? How do they get into, the appropriate place in a way that's comfortable and appropriate for them? And then based upon what their individual needs are there like pathways to the supports that they need that are in place before they have to start running around? And that there's a care or service management component to this to provide support to families as they're navigating the service system, because they're also trying to deal with whatever's going on in their lives. And this requires everybody working together in a little different fashion than the fragmented system that we have historically come to know. And then I think the final thing about this is, and Cindy, I think we'll probably talk about this, after we do all this and we make all these efforts, is this making a difference for families and kids or not? And so much of the human services have been thrown out there without thinking about what we're trying to achieve in the first place. And with Cindy's skill and foresight, one of the things that this Alliance is looking at right from the outset is how are we going to measure whether we're making a difference or not? And if we're not making a difference, we'll change. We have to be flexible and respond to it. So I guess we can go to the next slide. So I think that the benefit of this approach, because one of the really sad and unfortunate things that's happened in human services over the last, I would say 15 years or so, is that it's turned from a marketplace of cooperation and collaboration into a marketplace of competition. And a lot of organizations are afraid to work together because they think somebody's going to get the leg up on them, or they're going to get more funding. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges, that we face. I can talk about any issue we're facing as a country now. And if we can't figure out how to move from conflict and competition to cooperation and collaboration, then we are going to continue in a very, very, very bad path. So one of the things that we looked at in putting this together is, so who benefits from this? Is there something in this for everybody? And in doing this analysis, obviously, if this works, kids and parents are going to be in a much better situation than they were before this initiative starts in all, the various aspects of their lives, because this covers all aspects of their lives. And it also gives parents a very strong role in planning and implementation of services and supports throughout the process. And this process is purposely designed to be highly visible, highly transparent, and not only praising our successes, but critical of where we need to improve. So from the point of view of children and parents, this process, if it works, will be absolutely beneficial. Next slide. Also, for this to work, it's going to have to work for providers of service. And a lot of service providers are very frustrated because a family will come to them and they can't meet the needs of the family in their specific agency, but they don't know where to turn to meet the needs. So in talking to providers, if this alliance can work, it's going to be much more gratifying and much more effective for providers because they're able to meet the family's needs, whatever the needs are. We've done a lot of this collective impact work, and we've seen some of the most hard-nosed skeptics become the biggest champions, because there's something about having success together and working together, whether it's within a family or within a community or even within a political structure. There's something about people having success together that is so unusual these days that there's a spark to it. So there is the analytical part of this, but I think more importantly, there's sort of the magic and the art part of this that goes along with the analytical aspects of it. This program does include wraparound services, which means if there are specific needs that a family has, for example, the refrigerator goes out and they can't afford to buy a new one, but that's what's keeping them from, maintaining their, their lifestyle. Then there are wraparound funds that are available in this design to meet the concrete needs of families so that their lives aren't disrupted. And as we go through the process, particularly with all the new money that's coming in, there will be opportunities for professional development and wage increases. And that's the final point that I want to make, is that if you look at all the money that came from the CARES Act and the Emergency Rental Assistance Program and the American Rescue Plan, we are talking about billions of dollars that is flexible enough to go to support programs like this. And if we're not smart enough right now to do something and depart from the way we've been doing business, then shame on us. So I'm really, pleased to be here today, and thank you for having this gathering. And I think we need to go. One thing I don't know, Gloria, if Kathy Rose able to speak up, because I think
June made her a presenter. She can speak, Tom.
Okay. Oh, great. So before we move on, I'd like to introduce one of our other partners in the Family Success Movement, who is also a partner with the United Way of Central Jersey in this project. Kathy Rose, a longtime advocate, friend, burr under the saddle of some, but an amazing person. She is the executive director of Parents, Inc. of New Jersey. She is also on the board of the Family Success Institute, and she has become, one of the major leaders in the idea that parent leadership is probably the key to making all this work. So, Kath, I'm really pleased that you're able to join us and have a couple minutes, and then we will move on with the program. Hi.
Hi, thanks a lot, Tom. I really appreciate it. My organization has been working in New Jersey for over 40 years, and the primary work that we have been doing is doing support groups for parents, where we listen with parents, we share leadership with parents. And what parents were telling us all over the state, didn't matter whether it was in Princeton or Perth Amboy or Camden, was that their lives were so complicated by agencies, organizations. And when we think of just service providers, you also have to think parents are fighting with school systems. They're working with their doctor's offices to try to get the help they need, or the clinics. So their lives are incredibly complicated. So when we, as Dale was saying, when we start to set up service systems or hotlines or referral systems, parents really need help and education. The last 5 years, we've been working with United Ways to provide parent advocacy training, where we actually do full day workshops with parents and we teach them advocacy skills, not just for working with agencies, but for, standing up for themselves to get the services they need, for being able to say, yeah, I'm glad you're giving me this, but what we really need is this. Being able to know how to go to an IEP meeting and speak up and get what your kids need. I love that the first statement we always make about young children is that we want them to be safe, healthy, and ready to learn. None of that can happen unless their parents are safe, healthy, and advocates for their families and for their communities. So I'm thrilled that parent voice, parent engagement, meaningful parents, working with parents is part of the family success. It's one of the pillars of family success. And we're thrilled to work with the United Way and Gloria in this particular project. We can't wait to get the parents on board, and it will be a win-win for not only the agencies, but for families and communities in Middlesex County. Thank you, Tom. I tried not to be a burr under anybody's saddle this morning, so.
Thanks, Kathy. I think we're ready to move along.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Tom and Kathy. That was excellent. Finally, we have our last two speakers that will co-present. That's Dr. Cynthia Lammy and Dr. Krishana Lloyd. Dr. Lammy is currently the Vice President of Quality and Research at the Center of Family Services, one of New Jersey's premier social service agencies, and additionally works with Family Success Institute to support transformational policy change for children and families. She is the author of American Children in Chronic Poverty, Complex Risks, Benefit, Cost Analyses, and Untangling the Knot, along with other chapters and papers. Her focus is on vulnerable children, families, and schools, and began with her early work at Rutgers University as a research assistant, following hundreds of Head Start children and their families through elementary school, and continued as a principal investigator of studies on the quality and outcome of New Jersey's preschools as a senior fellow in the National Institute for Early Education Research at Rutgers University. While at the Robin Hood Foundation in New York City, she developed a system for the estimation of social return on investment across all of their grant making and led various committees of the New York State Early Childhood Advisory Council. In addition to sitting on the Scientific Advisory Council of the New York City OECE to help to support the rapid rollout of universal preschool. Dr. Krishana Lloyd is our senior research associate at Child Trends. She is a nationally recognized expert on the study and implementation of interventions to support early childhood and human service professionals in educational and social service settings. Dr. Lloyd has a considerable experience using a racial equity lens to conduct applied research, evaluation, and technical assistance for both federally and privately funded research projects in community-based settings, and works closely with communities to share and disseminate the lessons learned from her work with practitioners, researchers, policymakers, and funders. I am pleased to present Dr. Lammy and Dr. Lloyd. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lauren. We're so glad to be here. Krishana, are you going to launch the PowerPoint? You're on mute. You're on mute, Krishana.
Okay, sorry about that. I thought it was up and that you all could see it. Hold on.
That's okay. No worries.
Let me try to share again.
We can probably just skip the title page too.
Good. Can you see?
Yes, it's beautiful.
All righty, let's jump on in.
Thank you so much. So everyone, I feel like my part of our presentation is going to be to just sort of pull up some premises from the literature, from research that support this work. And I feel like I'm just underlining what's already been said by Dale and Tom and Kathy. So this is probably something that everyone has seen before, at least in a textbook. This is Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory pie chart. And what it shows is that children are embedded in layer upon layer of context. And in speaking with my colleague, Krishana, she was saying, you know, we don't like this anymore. We don't like that the child is separate. It feels like the child is in the middle and separate from the family, and children are not separate from their family. Absolutely right. That's right. And we're learning that more and more every day, even now, like 50 years after Bronfenbrenner has done it. Has it been 50 years? No, it can't be. What, early 80s, right? Late 70s, early
It was
80s.
late 70s, just to be
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, close. But the idea is that everything that happens outside of a family affects the development of children. It affects the development of children if families don't have the housing that they need, the healthcare that they need, the job, the living wage that they need, the transportation that they need, the winter coat that they need. So these things all influence children. But if you're living or working in one of those contextual fields, you may not realize just how much effect you have on children. So let me go to the next slide, Krishana. So that was the sort of theoretical premise that undergirds the work, much work that we're doing these days, and particularly what this alliance is all about, to support children through the support of their families. This slide, I feel like, is the premise for the need of this work. And what I really want to say is, and I took this from the Poverty Research Institute at Legal Services of New Jersey. They have a great series of papers on poverty in New Jersey. And they identified that the federal poverty line for a family of 3 is under $22,000 a year in earnings, in income. And so by this measure, we have about 800,000 people in poverty in New Jersey, or 9% of us. But in fact, there's a thing called the self-sufficiency standard that's gaining in progress across at least the Northeast, probably across the country. I know it from New York City. And the self-sufficiency standard for New Jersey shows that a family of 2 adults and 1 preschool age child is $66,000. You need $66,000 in order to not be impoverished, basically. And the premise of the self-sufficiency standard is that the adults are working, because most people who are low income are working, that there's no need for that family to have any kind of public or private support, that they don't have to trade off medicine for food or the new refrigerator for childcare, and that the budget that they're following is bare bones. So there's no extras, no extras. So $66,000 will keep your head above water in this state if you have 2 adults and 1 child. The self-sufficiency standard is estimated for about 12 different family types across every county and the state total. By that measure, we've got 3 million people, or about 1/3 of us, who are struggling. And so the idea here is that there's need out there. The need is extensive. It's much more extensive than we usually hear. So I would like to go to the next slide, Krishana. And this is the premise of what's happening now. What does it look like now in terms of support for families? And so, as Tom was saying, through the Family Success Institute, we wrote a paper. We looked at the state budget, which included state and federal dollars. And this is sort of the synopsis of that paper. And basically what you can take away from this, and there's a lot of complexity here and we could get into it in detail, we don't have to do that right now. The idea is that the red is money going toward distress. That's money going toward people who have already run into some real trouble in their lives. The green part is strength supportive and preventive programs. And so it's much, much smaller. In fact, it's 10% of the money that flows to people facing programs in the state. So, you know, what this is saying is that there's not enough support for strengths-based programs, for upstream early childhood, earlier programs that support families before distress happens. And so the Alliance is bringing that to bear. And given the fact that there's confusion, there's a jungle of programs out there, no fault of the folks who are working so hard to support the families and children. But what happens is that the system has a whole lot of friction in it, and the capacity of the system is less than what it needs to be. So bringing an alliance like this together to leverage what's out there and to squeeze the value out of the programs that exist and the expertise that's out there already, it's a great idea. I think that's my last slide. Is that right, Krishana?
Yep.
Krishana, you're taking the next slides.
Yep. So I'll jump in and just to kind of lay the groundwork for what I'll share, and I'll be talking about the research for specific programs. As Cindy, talked about, and Tom also mentioned, and Dale as well, right? We kind of have a lot of programs that are operating within the state. This slide here really shows the continuum of family and child support programs specifically. It was done by the Aspen Institute. I'm at an organization called Child Trends. We work really closely with Aspen. And what's nice about this slide is it allows you to really understand how programs work together to support entire family units. And in particular, what we're talking about is young children. And so to the left there, you see that they're child-focused programs, right? These are programs that focus specifically on children themselves. And within that, you can have programs that have different parent elements where they aim to support parents within the support that they're providing for children. Most often you see that in early childhood development programs, parenting skill programs, family literacy programs, health programs. And then on the right side, you see that there could be family or parent focused interventions. And the next step in those are parent-focused interventions or programs that have child-focused elements, right? So they're primarily focusing on the adult, but also have some elements that can potentially impact children. And those are programs like childcare, workforce development, food and nutrition supports, for adults and also for young parents as well. And all of these approaches, the aim is really to strengthen family well-being in an intentional way, but also simultaneously working with the children and adults in the family unit. And the idea, as that we mentioned, as we've talked about, is really important, is that these are preventative, right? They're really designed to optimize each person's potential, whether it be a child or an adult. Important in all of this, though, is that the programs need to be implemented well. And most of what we're talking about here, when I get to the research, will be programs that have an evidence base, what we call an evidence base, or research behind them. And so in order for those programs to be effective, they need to be implemented with fidelity, which is the way that the program developers intended them to be implemented. And when you get that, you have high quality programs that can really lead to having healthy adults with family supporting jobs, healthy children who are meeting developmental milestones, individuals who are better connected to each other and able to participate in civic and family life. I really love what Tom had to say about the social isolation and that being particularly harmful. And as we look at, kind of what's happening now with COVID as part of our landscape and the potential long-term impacts of that, we really do have to pay attention to these issues around civic engagement and isolation. So that's just a little bit of grounding about the programs that we'll discuss. So let's talk a little bit about what's happening in New Jersey. And these are just a sprinkling of programs. And you'll see here, if we think about the continuum, the adult kind of caretaker focused, you have programs like home visiting, which is a prevention strategy program. It supports pregnant women, new parents, helps to promote infant and child health, foster educational development and school readiness with young children, and help prevent child abuse and neglect. So it's a federally funded program. That money actually trickles down from the federal level to states and is implemented at the state level. And home visitors are kind of a range of people. There are home visiting programs that include nurses, which you see here, the Nurse Family Partnership. Some have social workers as key staff. Some have child development specialists. There are kind of a range of people that are doing this work and a range of home visiting approaches and models. These here are the ones that are occurring in New Jersey, and they are all evidence-based, meaning they have research underneath of them showing that they're effective for families and for children. We've got Housing First, which offers individuals and families who are experiencing homelessness immediate access to permanent or affordable and supportive housing. And then you have the Adult Substance Abuse Program, which provides people who are drug dependent, who are eligible for the program, an opportunity for treatment. And interestingly, that treatment can also occur while people are in prison, right? So instead of just kind of sitting there, right, they're actually engaged in work and getting supportive services that can help them with that addiction. With the child-focused programs in New Jersey, and these are specifically programs in ages 0 to 5, one of the kind of most well-known likely is Early Head Start and Head Start. Again, federal program with monies that come to states, trickle down into states to be implemented within the state locales and communities. Early Head Start and Head Start really integrates parent and family engagement. It's a key component of the program. So children are not just kind of getting dropped off, right? Family engagement is a critical component of that. Family-centered services are also important. So services that focus on physical health and wellness, as well as mental health and wellness, income supports, housing support. So really Head Start is kind of a whole child approach and a whole family approach where you're providing kind of early care and education to young children, but also offering supports to families to promote the development of those children. We've got universal pre-K, which is big, and we've been hearing a lot about that for the past probably 10 or 15 years in New Jersey, but increasingly so, with an interest in and really implementing universal pre-K across the state and not just in underprivileged communities. Excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat. Universal pre-K provides early care and education programming to all children. In an ideal world, New Jersey, this is what we're seeking for 3 to 4 year olds who are in the state. And then we have early intervention services. So those are supports that are available to babies and also young children who have developmental delays and disabilities. And those services are provided not only to the children, but again, to the families and the caretakers. And they include things like, physical therapy and speech therapy and occupational therapy, but also social work support services for the family members themselves, and sometimes respite to allow families to get a break. And then we have special child health services, which enhances the capacity of families to meet the developmental and health-related needs of their children. This is a case management program, and the program actually serves children that are older, so from birth to about 21 or 22, depending on where you are in the state. I think in Middlesex, it goes up to 22. And so again, these are children, young adults who have delays or developmental disabilities. And, this particular program provides education and support services through case management to families. So that's just a sprinkling of what's out there, right? And you can imagine kind of these levels of coordination that need to occur across these programs, right? And the way people might touch different systems. Okay, so what does the research say about these programs? And there's a ton. I'm at an organization called Child Trends, so do a lot of research and thinking about child and family outcomes across a range of programs. I just took a few here and happy to talk about, more if necessary. And I just kind of group these here. So we've got the home visiting and housing first programs, which appear at the top of the slide. And those are more of the adult caretaker focused programs, right? If we think about that continuum. And then towards the bottom of the slide, we have the early Head Start and universal pre-K, right? Which are more kind of child focused programs on that continuum. And you can see here, I won't read every bullet, but I think the bottom line here is that when you look across home visiting, when you look across housing first, early Head Start and universal pre-K, you find that there are a number of positive impacts on both families and children within these programs. And they range across a number of domains, whether they be economic and financial, such as increases in parents' earnings, whether they be related to children's social emotional and cognitive and academic growth and development. We see, for example, in early Head Start, and I should have prefaced this by saying that this work that I reviewed is, kind of based on longitudinal, long-term research and interventions, right? So not just something that's 1 or 2 years out, but looking at children and families over an extended period of time. And what we find there is that, kind of changes in children's social, emotional, and behavioral development that occurs in Head Start actually carries over into adulthood. Which is wonderful, right? Because what you see there is that, those impacts then affect adult things like self-control, self-esteem, parenting practices, right? So what you're spending at the beginning, right, in early care and education, those dollars that you're putting out, if you look at the, kind of last bullet there about universal pre-K and that last final bullet on the slide that talks about that high social return on investment, that's not just for universal pre-K. Across all of these programs, when you think about the monies and the dollars and the time and the investment that you're putting in on the back end, as we think about child outcomes, we see pretty significant differences in children and families who have access to these programs and the amount of money that is being spent on them in other systems, criminal justice, for example, TANF, welfare, et cetera, those non-preventative reactionary crisis systems that, Tom talked about. We're spending more money there because the work's not happening on the front end around the prevention pieces. So the bottom line is that family and child-focused programs are effective. They change lives for both children and adults, and they're cost-effective. So I'll just stop there, and I'm happy to go back and talk about any of the particular programs, but I realize we're getting a little bit of, short on time. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Cindy and Krishana. Really appreciated it. All right, I think we're now at the time for our Q&A section of the program. Looks like we have about 10 minutes for that. So if you had any questions, any thing that you wanted to ask our panelists today, please drop it in the Q&A, or you could simply raise your hand. And I think Jane actually had a question. So Jane is asking, how will the Alliance find the children and families that need help?
I can take a stab at that, Lauren. One key component of the Alliance staffing is going to be family outreach staff who will try to reach people where they are, in churches, at schools, at community meetings, to provide information about the Alliance and to receive information from parents about what they need. We also had in mind some marketing efforts, perhaps via a marketing firm. But when you think about our target audience, largely composed of people who may not want to come forward anyway, I think that it has to be a boots on the ground effort to find them and to become, as we say, trusted messengers in terms of helping them access services.
All right. Thank you very much, Dale.
Okay.
So this one is coming from Greenway FSC. And this person says, good morning. How can community organizations get involved in or partner with the Alliance?
That's a great question, Tom. I don't know if you want to take a stab at that first, but it's obviously so key, both in terms of reaching potential clients, in terms of expanding existing programs, or leveraging programs that are already available to them, making them aware of programs such as those offered by the FSCs. The possibilities for collaboration here are endless in terms of how the collaborations can help us really get to and work with and help community members.
I can add to that to say, how can we have a local family success initiative without the family success centers? The family success centers have to be crucial members. And not only the family success center, every family success center has a parent advisory council. And so family success centers are crucial to this effort. And I think that, by asking the question, you have become a member of the Alliance. But I think the other aspect of this, which is I've asked Cindy and Krishana this, because I think that one of the things that I have not been able to figure out, how do researchers measure the nature of relationships? How do you build trust? How do you measure love versus hate? And in my experience, after all these years of trying to work on this, that there are these intangibles that are as important as the protocols to make this all work. And so I think whether it's with a family success center or the single intake points or all the programs that Krishana talked about, it's building trusting relationships with people committed to a common purpose. And obviously the family success centers are there for exactly that. So welcome, Family Success Center.
And I will say too, just to jump in, I mean, there are actually some really nice, to your question, Tom, kind of statistical techniques and methods to really think about how you measure the interactions and the relationships within agencies, whether it's, kind of journey mapping or social network analysis or, eco mapping. So I think there are something they don't get at the love, right? They don't get at the special sauce that's also so important, those contextual issues that we know, and I do a lot of work, I think that was mentioned earlier around kind of racial equity issues, right? And, kind of how those types of considerations come to the fore. Those are the hard things to measure, right? But just that kind of relationship building, who's interacting with who, what types of exchanges are occurring, and how those benefit or not families and children absolutely can be measured. And I will say there's also kind of this growing interest on the federal level around how to assess models of coordinated services. And there's some interesting work that recently started this summer, actually. So no real findings yet, but, around this, in particular to early care and education and connections to health and human services type agencies. So, we can also keep our eye on that work, looking at a number of programs across the country. And key to that is really establishing and being clear across the agencies about the goals and the language that's used.
Terrific.
Very good. Seeing a lot of questions coming into the chat. This is great. We do have 4 minutes left. I'm going to ask June, are we allowed to go over a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good. All right, so this question's coming in from Venus Majeski. What is the timeline for the implementation of this program?
Venus, that's a great question. I wish I could fully answer it. However, I will say that we're in the hiring process now. We're in the structural process now in terms of just how we're going to set this up so that it runs smoothly. We're looking at the early beginning of next year to really get it going.
Good. All right, this one's coming from Luz Ray. While poor and working poor families may be the target, there is a need to support college-educated working women, especially in diverse communities. Will there be any outreach for this population?
As constructed at this moment, that is not a target. That group is not a target of the Alliance, except that there may, of course, be college students within our parent group. So, of course, they would get the attention they need through the Alliance. It's possible. And also, United Way is looking at some other financial opportunity type programs that would help those women, because certainly, yeah, that need is there. It's something, and as I said, something that could be partially addressed by the Alliance, but also some other mechanisms that we're looking at now.
Excellent. And that actually was from Muriel Grummett, not Lewis Ray. Venus Majeski is asking, the Alliance will only be as effective as the service providers or agencies that are involved. How will agencies be measured for their effectiveness and supported in their efforts?
Okay, Venus, you're putting my feet to the fire this morning. One key element of the Alliance, and one thing that we've budgeted for, is an evaluation method, to create an evaluation method, or to use an existing evaluation method to assess the progress of the effectiveness of what we're doing, and whether or not we need to modify it in some way. We don't have that mechanism in place right now, but we know that evaluative systems exist, and we definitely want to close the loop. So it's something that's on everyone's mind.
Yeah, I can just add to that, because this is
Thank you.
This is something that Cindy and I have talked about a lot, and I think Krishana would agree with this, that in my experience, evaluation is always sort of an afterthought to see how the program worked. And what we've talked about is evaluation and research and feedback being built into the beginning of the program. So it's not only to see long-term how it's working, but to be a critical component in assuring that it's on track in the first place. And Krishana, you're talking about the clarity of goals and what this is all about up front, and that's what's going to be measured, is crucial. So I don't know if either of you want to mention a little more about this way of looking at evaluation.
Hey, Tom, can I jump in a minute?
Sure.
I just wanted to say one of the easiest ways for organizations to find out how well their services are doing and how well they're providing services is to engage and ask parents. When you get a group of parents together, they can give you the clearest idea of, yeah, there's this program and that program, but what I really need is this. So to start to build into all of our systems to get parent feedback, family feedback on how are we doing. And not only just feedback, but then bringing them in and having them assist us to make better decisions, provide better, more family-oriented work, services to them.
One thing I found out working with United Way is that, as has been said, parents are very clear about what they need and what they're not getting. And sometimes, or oftentimes, their sentiments are muted and they don't really come to the fore in a way that then leads to change or then leads to greater empowerment or engagement of the parents. So I think that when we've been thinking about how the Alliance will operate, parents, community members have to be a key part of that. Otherwise, we're just talking to each other, and that doesn't make sense.
And I think that that's an incredibly important part of evaluation. We must listen to the folks that we're trying to serve. And there's got to be a quality feedback loop going on in the process. Extremely important to do that. But at the beginning of a program, at the launch of a program, you're setting these things up. You are building that trust with families and parents to be able to speak truthfully and know that their opinions are important and are actually going to make change. But you're looking at implementation. So before you can ever think about outcomes, you need to look at the implementation of the program. And so that will be most important early.
And that's why the family, the outreach people will be very, very important, because they're actually our link to what's going on and to who we ought to be bringing in and whose opinions we ought to be taking into account.
All right, and this is our last question, also from Venus. She's asking, what is the handoff when a child turns age 5?
That's a great question.
Tom is muted. Tom, you're muted.
A couple things about that, because in other communities where we've been working, the family success approach goes from before a child is conceived to the time of the end of the life of that older person. And in the same way that this alliance is structured to focus on very young children, a whole other section of our work is positive youth development. So when kids get into school, the families have the same issues about income and health and all these other issues. And so that in communities where we're doing the full, there are a couple of communities where we're working from birth to the end of life. I suspect as the Alliance develops and gains momentum in Middlesex County, two things are going to happen. It will become more universal, the question about its universality, because all parents face issues and challenges and need support. And secondly, it's going to have to begin to evolve into school age kids and transitions to adulthood and positive adulthood experiences, and even into, as people become my age, we have the same set of challenges. So our movement is both universal and lifelong, but in the Alliance, it recognizes the crucial importance of the very early years.
All right, very good. Well, I want to thank everyone. I want to thank our panelists, number one, for a very fascinating discussion today. There are a lot of great things that we all have taken away. Maybe we have a new calling that some of us have left with, or a reason to have hope in sometimes some very challenging and difficult work. And thank you to our audience today as well for the support, the great questions, and joining us this morning. So now I'll turn it back over to June.
Okay, well, if you're looking for more information about the Alliance, you can contact Gloria Aftansky or Dale Callender. The contact information is up on the slide. You can also check out our website, uwcj.org, to learn more about Women United, who were the hosts for our show today. And that's it. Thank you so much for coming. Oh, also, we have a book drawing for two books now. We have the Oprah Winfrey book that we're going to be drawing for, as well as a copy of Dr. Lammy's book as well. So we'll be emailing the winners for that. That's it. Thank you for participating.
Everyone.
Thank you.